She's the Eternal that almost worked. We're talking about Sersi. Hi, I'm Nando, and in these videos, I take a character from Marvel Comics. I talk about their background, their power set, their personality, and give you some reading recommendations. And that is all because this week, that character is being introduced into the collectible card game, Marvel Snap. So if you want to know about Marvel Snap stuff, that comes at the end. If you've always just wanted to know about Sersi, that's the beginning bit here. So Sersi, like all the rest of the Eternals, is an Eternal. So first of all, she spells her name differently than other versions of Sersi. It's S-E-R-S-I. And that is different from, say, the one from Greek mythology or the one from Wonder Woman comics, because those are mainly the two Cersis I think people are familiar with. The one from Greek mythology, obviously a witch or sorceress or whatever you want to call her, who's on an island. Odysseus bumped into her. His crew ate her food. She turned him into pigs. Then eventually she turned them back into guys and they left because Odysseus was able to charm her, I think, or something. But I don't know, Odysseus and her got along, and then eventually the guys became not pigs again and left. And then in DC Comics, and very famously in the DC animated universe, Sersi is a witch that fights Wonder Woman, and specifically turned Wonder Woman into a pig in that one episode of the animated series where Batman sings that everyone loves. That's Sersi. So this Sersi technically was the same character because the Eternals are beings that were engineered by a race of super god alien things called the Celestials. And this origin had always been messed around with, but like as far as the Eternals knew, they were turned into this race of things to protect the world from another race of things called Deviants, which were like these monster guys who could reproduce really quickly. Whereas the Eternals, they had lots of superpowers, so there were like 100 of them, but they could not reproduce. It was almost a quantity versus quality kind of thing. It's obviously more complicated than that, and more interesting comics have done more interesting things with the Deviants specifically. We talked about that a lot in the Athena video last week, but that's what the Eternals are. And a lot of them, like Gilgamesh last week, have existed in mythology and some forms of history. Many of them are Greek or Roman gods, some like Gilgamesh, Sumerian legendary kings. Sersi, not a goddess. As far as I know, she's some sort of witch in Greek mythology. And this Sersi was that, right? All the legends you heard about the witch Sersi were actually the Eternal Sersi. I know it doesn't sound like it, but I'm kind of trying to pronounce the S's. It's not working. So she romanced Icarus. She had the island. She turned men into pigs, and then he left. And that's the first pretty important thing about Sersi. And I'm going to, a lot of, in this video, relate the character in the comics to the character from the movies. I guess some of the Eternals were written with a very broad brush. I would say Makari was somewhat that, Kingo, Ajax. Sersi feels like they were trying to get at something pretty specific with her. And I think it's interesting because of how much it doesn't feel like comic Sersi. And this is not saying I didn't like Eternals. I think the movie is, I think it's pretty good. I enjoy watching the Eternals movie, and I think Gemma Chan is good in it. I just think the character they're having her play doesn't feel like Sersi to me. It's mostly that Sersi in the comics is this trickster witch character, and that's based on the Greek mythological figure, but that is who Sersi was. And all the times we met her back in the day, like in the origin of the Eternals, and then when she joined the Avengers, she did kind of fill that role. She was fun. She liked to party, she liked to flirt with Captain America to make him uncomfortable, and she liked to kind of cause mischief. She's not like an anti-hero the same way that someone like Loki in the MCU now is written, where he is like constantly trying to cause mischief. She just like didn't play by the rules. She didn't do what the other Eternals said, and a lot of the time that's what made her so interesting, and it is why she's the one Eternal, it seems like, that was able to cross over out of the Eternals comics into something else. For her, it was the Avengers. So Sersi joins the Avengers after Gilgamesh gets punched really hard and dies. She worked where Gilgamesh didn't for a couple of reasons. Also, Gilgamesh didn't like fully die. He's an Eternal. But like he got punched so hard that he was out of commission, and Captain America, after Nebula started doing some weird stuff, was like, oh, we really do need like somebody like that. Hey, remember when Gilgamesh got knocked out? We brought him to that person, Sersi. Let's see if she wants to join the team. So Sersi joins the Avengers, and like I said, right off the bat, she works better. Number one, she's just not a copy of Thor, which is pretty much what they were doing with Gilgamesh. We already had a Thor. There was no reason to have another Thor. And second, she is just more of an interesting, kind of fun character. She fits the vibe of the Avengers in the early 90s, which is like that Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, but also Wonder Man and Hercules. So that vibe is a little bit more fun, especially it's kind of transitioning in that direction because this is the same time that the West Coast Avengers are happening. So like out of all the Eternals, Sersi feels like the Eternal that would make the most sense on this Avengers team. On top of that, she's a woman, which there were not a whole lot of Avenger women at the time, but specifically, she kind of feels like a mix between Wasp, what people liked about Wasp, which is, you know, lighthearted, fashion designer turned superhero, and Wanda, like all the superpowers, cosmic magic stuff. She was able to do transmutation because all of the Eternals have kind of all of the superpowers when they start out, and over the course of their very long lives they decide which ones they like the best and min-max their stats appropriately. So like Makari is the fastest Eternal, Gilgamesh is the strongest. They can all still kind of fly and kind of do like punching and stuff like that. Well, Sersi can fly, she can still do laser beams, she's still relatively strong and durable, but her main thing is matter transmutation. So in the movie, she can only turn non-living things into other non-living things, and then eventually, very late in the game, she gets all the power, turns a living thing into a non-living thing. In the comics, she could do whatever, because she's based on the Sersi that turned guys into pigs. So like that's a thing she uses in the comics to fight people sometimes. She can obviously transmute, say like garbage into gold, but she can also transmute a guy into a pig if she wants. She's very powerful. She also has all kinds of psychic powers. She can read minds and protect the Avengers by creating force fields and stuff like that. She is all around like a way more useful member of this team than Gilgamesh would have been. Especially because like Gilgamesh, when he was on the Eternals, I think, well, definitely Thor was there. I'm trying to remember if Hercules was there too, but it's like, you guys just form a club, just start a boy band or something. We don't need the three of you on this team. We need a little bit more variety. Like in the first issue that Sersi joins the Avengers, Spider-Man's also there, and it's like, yes, this is why a Spider-Man would be here. It's because he's different from the rest of you guys, the same way that Sersi is different from the rest of you guys. I don't know, this is just like, it's not an important thing. But Sersi is an Eternal, so she kind of had Eternal rules and Eternal problems. One of them is the Eternals can do something called the Unimind, which has been re-evaluated a couple times, but overall, the Eternals can link their consciousness together to do a big special thing. Sometimes it is to give one Eternal all of the power so they can do something very important. Sometimes it does other specific things, but either way, the Unimind can be used to link other Eternals. An Eternal can do it. However, apparently you could also Unimind with just other things. And one time, Sersi Uniminded with an alien. And she did it because she needed to save them, and she did, so hooray. But later, the Eternals show up, and they're like, hey, by the way, Sersi, that thing you did, it is bad, and it has corrupted your mind. It has advanced what we in the Eternal business call the Mod Weary, which is this weird little disease that the Eternals get that's basically like robot dementia, where they, over a course of a very long time, because yeah, their bodies are eternal, but their brains still kind of are brains. So like over hundreds and thousands of millions of years, they just kind of lose it and they need to be reset or remade, and that basically means killing them. So Icarus, Sprite, and Ajax show up and they're just like, hey, Avengers, real quick, we need to talk to Sersi because we're going to have to turn her into atoms and kill her because otherwise she's going to go insane and become a bad guy. And the Avengers are like, well, no, you can't do that to an Avenger. And Sersi's like, yeah, please don't. But also, I have a loophole. There's this weird little kind of mating, kind of spiritual bonding ritual we Eternals can do. I'll just do that with one of these guys and everything will be cool. And they go, oh, okay. And then she does. She picks Dane Whitman, the Black Knight. This is the character played by Kit Harington in the Eternals. And they are soul bonded forever. This is something Dane Whitman probably would have liked to have known about before it happened, because he is currently dating Crystal, or at least like into Crystal. They have feelings. She has just broken up with Quicksilver, so it's like a good time for them. But also Sersi's like, if we don't share mine, my cousin's gonna come and execute me. So like, please don't, complicate that. And Sersi and the Black Knight became a team for a while. This version of Sersi was also like the more aggressive version of Sersi. It gets explained away, and this happens more than you'd expect in comics, where a character takes a dark turn, one that seems relatively in character, or like could be, but then eventually gets retconned to being somebody else's deal. So like Wanda kills some Avengers and she, went hex crazy. Everything was fine. But then everybody's like, no, actually, that was Dr. Doom that was mind controlling Wanda to do that. She would never do something like that. She's cool. And that's kind of what happened with her. Sersi turned out she was being mind controlled by an evil version of the Black Knight from another dimension who was mad that she wouldn't be his girlfriend. So he went through the multiverse to get revenge on all the Cersis. This character was named Proctor. And this was the 90s. This is when Kang stuff was happening. I feel like there were a lot of stories like this where an evil version of a character from the multiverse, you know what it really is this feels a lot like stuff that was happening in the Excalibur books at the same time, where there was a version of a character that we knew who we didn't, clearly had some baggage, who is going around the multiverse getting revenge on their ex for things their ex did. Like, that story was happening at the same time, although that was, I think, a little bit earlier. Also, some notes that I skipped because I didn't have my notes out, because this is the second time I've recorded this one. We have the Breathin is the name of the alien race that Sersi mind melted with, uniminded with. And then Ganjosin, Gannjosin, is this soul bond thing that Sersi does. It's another word that I've never heard spoken. I'd imagine that's what it sounds like, but yeah. So Sersi and the Black Knight had some adventures. They were kind of good together. Like, I don't hate this team. I actually think they're fun. I think Dane as a character in the 90s and then 90s Sersi actually worked pretty well together. The two most notable things that they did, they went to the Ultraverse as part of this big Marvel Ultraverse crossover, which the Ultraverse was in the 90s. Everybody was starting their own comic universe, including this one called the Malibu Comics universe. It didn't really take off, and they merged it with the Avengers. Like, they did an Avengers Ultraverse crossover, and during that crossover, I'm only bringing it up because a lot of characters are there. But specifically, Sersi got overpowered by the Infinity Stones, including, I think, the secret 7th Infinity Stone from the Ultraverse, I think. I don't remember. But it's not that important. It's just something that happened to her. But it's like a big event thing, so nobody talks about it. I think at the end, they all got their minds wiped. There's a lot of the stories about the Eternals and just in general end like that. It's like, well, okay, then do they know any of this? Like, why am I even saying it? None of it counts. The other thing that they did, this I'm almost positive ends with them getting their minds wiped. They went back in time, Dane and Sersi, and they ended up in olden night times. So Dane fits right in. And then they met a friend who at the time wasn't a bad guy, named Bennett de Paris, who's also known as Exodus. So this is the mutant Exodus's origin story. I don't know if it had been told up until this point, or just like inferred upon. Like, I think he existed before this because he is like a knight from the olden days, and he has a whole thing with Apocalypse that's complicated. Exodus is cool. I like Exodus. But yeah, so they met Exodus in the past, and turned out that they had this kind of like loop relationship with him where like they helped him become Exodus and he saves them, but only because they met him. And again, they have to get their memories wiped, I believe. Eventually, Sersi and Dane break up. I don't know what this means for the Ganjosin and Soul Bond, but like at this point, it was like, listen, we're pretty much done with this character. We're done with the Eternals. And Sersi is really, like I said, the only Eternal that hit. They had tried to get Gilgamesh and certain other ones to go, but they just didn't go. So this was the end of the Eternals in the 90s. The 2000s roll around, we get the Neil Gaiman books. Sersi is a big part of that. Like all the Eternals, Sprite erases their memory, so they don't know they're Eternals. They just get regular day jobs, don't know they have superpowers. And then they all find out they have superpowers. She is a party planner because Sersi is a socialite, loves planning parties, she's fun, and she learns that she can turn matter into other matter, turns trash into gold, and just buys a sick apartment, has a great time. Makkari is kind of the main character of that book, and in that book, Makkari and Sersi have a relationship. This is something that had happened throughout history. She has dated plenty of other Eternals. They're not like, some of them are kind of related, but for the most part, they're just like, you know, co-workers. So that's not that unusual. Makkari and her are a thing. Her and Icarus, like in the movie, are a thing. I don't know if there's a precedent for that. I don't think those two would really get along because like in the comics, Icarus really is like really straight edged, and that's how he's always described. In the comics, Sersi is kind of more of a troublemaker. I just don't think she's his type. I think that the pairing could be interesting. But for the most part, because he is, I'd say, the Cyclops of the Eternals, and she is the Wolverine, whereas he is technically the main character, like team leader, but she is the most popular character who branched out and people like. A lot of the times when there's a big Eternal story, they're doing different things because they're like the two most important characters. So you have one do one thing and one do the other thing. The most interesting thing that Sersi does in this story, because Makkari is talking to the dreaming Celestial, it doesn't matter, we'll talk about it next week, he dies and we still need an Eternal to do that, and it needs to be Makkari. So Sersi uses magic to transmute and, like I said, like kind of change herself completely, because she could do that with living things, change herself into Makkari. So like gets his essence, his mind, and obviously looks like him. And that's Sersi for a while. And then, you know, it's cool. That's a pretty impressive thing. I think out of all of the things Sersi has done, she's done many things that are impressive. A lot of the Eternals say she's like the strongest Eternal. And I think she's probably done more, you know, cool things. Like even in her first appearance with the Avengers, she like saved them all from being blipped out of existence. Like that's pretty cool. But I think this is one of the more like impressive feats of Sersiing. Sersi was part of the Chaos War, as I brought up in my Thor 5 pitch, where they fought Ematsu Mikaboshi. You're welcome to watch that video on the Nando V Movies channel to get a sense for what that is, but that's why I put her there. And I think she can fit along with these gods. Like, she can have a relationship with them that's interesting. So I don't know. And then we did this new era of the Eternals, which is mostly written by Kieran Gillen and ends with Judgment Day. Sersi is a main character in that. I'm not going to spoil that book. I will say at one point the Avengers fight the X-Men, fight the Eternals, like they're all of them are fighting. So this is a point where the Eternals are fighting the Avengers, and everybody's got their own like guy to take care of. So it's like, you go fight him and we'll fight them. Sersi, you fight Namor. And Sersi's like, I will make sure Namor does not enter the fight and make things more difficult for everybody. And they're like, that is not what we asked specifically, but you do you. And Sersi just goes and hangs out in a hot tub with Namor, and he's like, all right, this is good. And, you know, as far as the objective is concerned, Namor didn't join the battle, and they seem to have a good time, so it's pretty fun. Sersi plays a big part in the end of the Axe book, and I will say, for reading recommendations, that's going to be my main recommendation for Sersi. Although I do think the Avengers book she's in are interesting, but like the Avengers vs. X-Men, oh, here he is. I don't even care. So Avengers vs. X-Men, Axe, Judgment Day, that storyline is very much, I think it's a really good storyline because it weaves a lot of different characters together, but does focus very specifically on the Eternals and Sersi specifically. Like, gives her a lot to do. I think that's great. Other things about Sersi that are important, I think are interesting. All of the Eternals traditionally kind of have an outfit or like a color scheme. Sersi has a couple of these, and it's one of the other reasons I think Sersi's just cool is because she's one of those characters who's had a couple of different costumes, and they're all pretty good, and they all feel like decent, like remnants of the decades that they are from. So like that original Eternals costume felt very like basic, bold colors, Kirby, you know, black and a color. So she had green. She was the green one, like that. But then the costume she wears when she's part of the Avengers, like the Dane Whitman years, that is a very fun 90s costume. Anybody that got to wear a leather jacket over their costume automatically had one of my favorite costumes. And then you had her more current costume, which I'd forgotten about this, is purple and like is a whole different thing. And I love that. I don't know. A lot of the times when you start changing looks, it just doesn't work. And I'm surprised that Sersi is one of the only characters where it like does consistently work. And it's another reason it's a shame that she doesn't have more variants in Marvel Snap, because in Marvel Snap, you know, some cards start with plenty of variants, but now each one seems to launch with one variant that's in the Spotlight Cache, which I guess maybe this is just to, you know, make you get the one in the Spotlight Cache if you want a variant. But I don't know, man, there's a lot of opportunities here, not just for like different artists, but just Sersi in different costumes. I think that could be cool. Yeah, Sersi's fun. As far as reading recommendations, I really will say Axe. And Axe is Avengers, X-Men, Eternals, right? That's AXE. It's my favorite, like, I don't know, Marvel event crossover thing in the last like 5 years, probably. It's written by Kieran Gillen with art by Valerio Schiti, Marte Garcia, and Clayton Cowles. Like, I would say any Eternals book, except for the first Eternals book, has a solid focus on Sersi. I think after the Avengers stuff, they understood she should be, if not the main character of one of these stories, a main character. So like the Kieran Gillen stuff that led up to this, she was one of the main characters. Neil Gaiman stuff, one of the main characters. So you can really read any Eternals comic and get some good Sersi moments out of it. And I do think she's really fun. I do kind of wish that the Eternals movie, I don't know, I mean, I liked it. I feel like that's maybe one of the problems is they spend a lot of energy trying to make these characters very down to earth, regular guys, very relatable. Some of them were larger than life personalities, but I honestly think there's a version of a movie like this where Dane Whitman is a normal guy and all of the Eternals are like turned up to 11, and maybe that would be a little too much, and that's probably not what Chloe Zhao was going for. Obviously, it's not her style, but like I do think that, having read a lot of Eternals recently, I think that's how they tend to feel. Like even a character like Captain America goes up to one, he's like, I'm Captain America, I want you to do this. And immediately they make him feel uncomfortable because they have and like that's the fun thing about them. They've existed forever. So like they've seen it all. They know who they are. They've got lots of swagger. Even the ones that are kind of jerks, like it's, I don't know. I like the Eternals. I don't know how much we're going to see in the future, but there's a lot of space for them. In Marvel Snap, Sersi is a 5-cost 7 power with the on-reveal ability to transform your other cards here into random cards that cost 1 more if able. First, let's start here. I think this is one of the best cards this season in terms of lore, because she can transmute things, she can create other things, and it's not necessarily random, but I would say Sersi kind of like Wanda and some other characters, very powerful, but somewhat chaotic. And that's maybe more of her nature. But like, I feel like Sersi will play this way. Like with Thena, it's very controlled. You have to put the right amount of cards exactly where they're supposed to be. It's 2 per turn and you can get a lot of power out of her. But with Sersi, it's like, put some cards out, Sersi him, see what happens. Like there's some decks obviously she's going to work great with. The Sentry is one where like she will be able to turn the -8 Void 4 into a, you know, maybe a Vision or something like that, a 5-cost card. That could be really good. There's going to be other instances where she turns a 5-cost into a Destroyer and it kills all your other cards in the field. So like high risk, high reward. But I think in terms of how this relates to the character and how it feels like what Sersi in the Eternals is able to do, perfect, like really good. I also think this card is being slept on by the community. I feel like I've seen a lot of people talking about ranking these cards. A lot of people have Fastos really high, and I think a lot of the cards this season are interesting, and I can see how different ones will be broken. I think this is the one that I'm the most excited about because it gives the most opportunity for just crazy stuff. Like someone brought up on the board today, what if you Sersi into a Wong? Like if you Sersi into a Wong, will it Sersi them again? I think the answer is yes. Like there's just, we don't have a card that transmutes exactly like this does. We have cards that generate random cards like Shayna, but this is a new thing. And I think this really works. Like I always say, the variants are bad. I will say, you know, I kind of get what they're going for here with this base card, but the base art for Sersi is very strange. She's got almost green skin. I think that makes her look more like an alien than I think she normally does. But I think the Francisco Tomaselli art is great. Love that she's got the purple costume in that one. I wish that there were more. Like I said, I think out of all of the Eternals, this is the one that has the most options for fun costumes because she has had multiple costumes. But also, like, I guess I do think, like, if you look at the Neil Gaiman run, those covers by Rick Berry, very iconic looks, especially the Sersi one. Like, it's probably the first thing that comes to mind when I think of that character. That should be a card. And I'm sure they're saving some of them for future Spotlight cards, but just put some of them in the store, please, just so we can have them. Because I am excited for this card. I'm willing to give it a try. I don't know if it's going to be like a card I use a lot, but I'm looking forward to it. And I like it if my cards look cool, especially if they have a comic like history, if there's some cover or something like that. I think that's fun. So if you like this video, please share it with people that enjoy Marvel Snap and Marvel Comics. I put these up on Nebula a week early. So when this is up on YouTube, that means I believe the Makari video will be live on Nebula. So there's a million reasons for you to subscribe to Nebula. It's great. This is not also like a sponsored Nebula ad. I'm just saying, if you decide to sign up for Nebula, use the code TheNandoCut, and then you get a discount. It helps the channel. I will also say, you know, I like being in the know about snap cards and stuff. And obviously, I've been making these videos now for a couple months. I would love to be in the Marvel Snap content creators, you know, program thing, so I could get more information about upcoming cards and stuff like that. I don't know why they don't respond to, you know, my email that I sent them. But, you know, if there's any of the people from that program that watch these videos, you could definitely reply to me. I would appreciate that. So that's the last little passive aggressive thing I'm going to add to this video. Stay safe, everybody. I will see you next time.